For the record, Pirate.Utopia, part 21. I can't believe it's part 21 already. These are just flying by. And this was an episode that I'm just like, it's funny because I feel like Felix and I have an episode being housemates every morning over coffee where it's like we just like get really fired up, and I'm either left thinking like I want to go make art, I'm super inspired, or I'm left like questioning like what have we just talked about, like different angles of like things that I'm not putting awareness on. And yeah, I guess I genuinely feel like this is gonna be an interesting conversation because we've never not had one really. And giving you the opportunity to share your work and connect with some of our listeners is, yeah, man, it's an absolute pleasure. And I'm just so grateful that you said yes to coming on the show.
Yeah, definitely. It's been very fun to have those conversations, and learned a lot about cryptocurrency that I had not thought about before. But yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, that's one of like the cool things about our conversations is like we're very passionate about just different stuff, and a lot of times it can be like drastically different. And then like there's like little bits and pieces that I'm picking up, and I'm like, actually, like that, it applies to me, and I'm like starting, it's just interesting how like a potentially like unlikely character, if you will, can really like inspire you and like turn you on in cool ways that you would have never necessarily like from an ego's perspective said, oh, here's somebody I'm just like I would expect to like be inspired by and be like engaged in all my conversations with.
Yeah, I've definitely felt the same way where it's definitely things where I feel like it's stuff but so antithetical, but then like we kind of piece our way together like throughout the conversation where it's like, oh yeah, like I can see how that's interesting to you, and like also like these different parts of you that are like interested by it that seem similar. I mean, like just that I can still connect with it, but it's not something I like naturally have an interest in, just out in the wild.
Right. So another one of our parallels is that we're both from the Bay Area and we live in like Woodstock, New York, which is like not a big town. And I mean, we grew up honestly probably like 20 or 30 minutes apart from each other. And my at least I had like a parent figure in my life who was a professional artist. Your mom has been doing art, drawings, paintings your whole life. Was that like something that you were like, for sure this is what I'm going to do right away, or did it just grow on you? Or
That's a good question. I mean, I definitely got a head start doing art because of my mom. She's like, I mean, we do similar types of art. She's like a figurative artist and has been doing a like painting group for 20 years. And so I would like model for her whenever I was sick as a kid. She would be like, okay, sit in this chair and be still for 2 hours. And but then when I got older, like I would model for the drawing group or like go to the drawing group. And that, I mean, it's always been a huge part of my life and something I really love to do. But I definitely didn't think that I would try to like be an artist until, I mean, I think it's just been a series of like everything else not really working out and then being like, I feel like I'm really like, just if I can be good at something, it would be this, and then like just every time I'm like, like I'm applying to college, so I apply to somewhere that I can go to, like be a psychologist or something, and then being like, I'd rather just do art, like, and I think I could, and just kind of like half making the step every time.
Uh,
But yeah, so
yeah, I
yeah,
guess like I like when I like growing up around a real artist or a professional artist, if you will, like
yeah.
I never thought like, oh, I'm gonna take this somewhere someday either. But looking back on it, I remember as a kid being like, those are shitty markers. Those are Crayola markers. Like we have
Yeah.
Prismacolor markers. We have this brand Copic marker.
Oh,
Whatever. Like I could tell the difference even as a young person that there was like Pro Tools and there's like kind of the crap they want you to use because you're just a kid. So that
yeah,
was, I mean, even now, when you learn a new tool and you're like, oh, that's how they do that. I mean, it's very helpful to have the right tools to accomplish what you're trying to do.
definitely. Yeah, I definitely get that and think that like yeah, be having a parent who has all of the right tools and like can teach you like some of the processes and like I think just being I mean like my mom was doing like mono prints when I was a kid and she's an oil painter and does gouache and so like having like being able to work in all of those mediums like just really helped me develop I mean like I think it just helps you develop like a way of like just like knowing how you are as like seeing the through line between all those things
Hmm.
and like how to pick up something and be creative with it rather than I don't know like just to get you thinking about it in that way I think is important. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like that's like my definition of art and like what it means to be an artist kind of like keeps changing, and this is like a topic that we've touched on a few times in this on this show. Like, there's that feeling that that you're called to make art or music, and like, but I think to the new artist or the newer, less experienced artist, maybe less confident. I don't know how you want to describe it, but my misconception used to be like, I'm gonna make art and that's gonna pay for all my bills, right? And it's like occasionally you can, get paid for your art or your music for most people,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm expecting it to like take care of you completely. Like that's a big expectation, but you know, do you feel like you're like in that space where you're depending on your art to make take care of you, or are you like, no, this is just what I do, and like I do what I have to do to take care of myself in other ways?
Um, well, I guess I mean I I don't know. I think well right now I'm definitely at a crossroads where I'm looking at like all sorts of ways to sort of, like that I might like to make money or to make art and like how those two things overlap and I think it's interesting like I mean right now I'm I would like to start a business that's related to the art I make, like making clothes or um like interior furnishing stuff, like blankets or pillows or something. But um right, I mean it really is so much at a crossroads right now that I'm kind of like how much time and like money and energy do I invest in this one, in this pursuit versus my art and it just feels like every time I think of a business to do, it's like I think that could be pretty successful, but like I also don't know how like I want to be involved in the experimentation of it. And that's like the exciting bit and then just like producing something seems a lot less exciting to me. And that's also kind of what art is like doing the experimentation and just following like a drive, like this like curiosity and creativity and like so it's hard to say like, oh, I'll have a certain amount of that and then like do I don't know, like something more boring to just make money with it. But I mean, I think I probably will have to do something more boring to just make money with it, because it's uh you need it to keep going. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to balance those things. I think also, like, in the past I've had jobs like doing knitting for designers and stuff like that, which has, like, I mean, it's been so far away from like the art I actually want to make, but it's really told me a lot about like what I could make and what the objects that I make could actually be out in the world. Like, as much as I don't really want to be a apparel designer, like, knowing how to make a good piece of apparel that can exist out in the world feels really like a cool skill to have, you know? Like, and that could then be a piece of art, but it's also functional as a sweater or a jacket or something like that. Is a, like, that's just a cool duality of it. But then, like, not being, I like this space where you're not depending on it to be functional. It's just like it could be, and that would be a nice bonus. Or it looks a lot like a functional jacket, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, because you said it like earlier, like, well, maybe I have to do something more boring to, generate income regularly or whatever. And I think that's an option for you, but I don't necessarily agree that's the only option. And at
Yeah.
least in my experience, I did do like really pretty boring, mundane jobs, through a period of my life, and kind of thought like, this is just the rest of my life, and I
Yeah.
never thought things could change and evolve. And I really think if you follow what you're passionate about, like there, you know, there's a reason you're passionate about it because it's like we need somebody to do that job. Like,
Yeah.
there's all these different roles and there's like all these different like just all these different things changing in our world now. I mean, even like the fact that you got to go to I'll let you discuss your education if you want to, but like the fact that you got to go to a great school and have that experience
Yeah.
is like, people may not even get that anymore.
Yeah.
Like that type of experience, like just our world's literally like entering a new age, and it's like the hippy dippy way to say it, but it's like if you really look around physically, things are changing fast.
Yeah. Totally. I know. I mean, definitely it is pretty scary to think of, like, especially for artists, like doing Zoom calls and like not having physical time with each other, and like, just being so far away from each other and like not able to collaborate and like see what everybody else is working on every day.
Uh-huh.
I can't imagine like going to school right now and not having that community. It's very important. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I also think it's, I mean, I guess I will go into a bit of like, I went to the Rhode Island School of Design for it from 2014 to 2018, and did textiles there. And uh, I mean, definitely that built the foundation for what I'm doing right now. Like, in textiles, it was a lot of, I mean, at RISD, you get sort of like, you have to do all of the, like, these classes freshman year that are just like basic art stuff. So, like, a drawing class, a sculpture class, sort of like more designy graphic design class. And then, like, so like for the first year, that's like all of the art classes you take, and then you have to declare your major by the second year. And I was like going to go into ceramics, last minute did textiles, and then just, like, I just saw some textile stuff that I was like, that looks pretty cool, and I know how to knit. Like, should be easy as that. But then, I mean, like, I didn't use any of the skills I had known previously to like do the textiles I made at school. But I did learn like a bunch of like how to weave on a loom, and like, and then it built up to like using computers to program different like weaving or knitting. And that's where I really got to like paint or do, like make imagery and then make it into textile stuff. And that's like, I mean, and then after school, I just like had no way to do any of that. So I just, yeah, and just now getting back into it, which is, it's interesting to just see like those different, like to get access to something and then like have it be taken away or like become so much more difficult and not be able to experiment anymore, and like how big of like a loss that was, and like how much I didn't realize I had it when I had the chance, or like how valuable it was the time I had with it. But
I'm just trying to like, because you said you, at least in our conversations before, that you were really into ceramics as like when you were younger. You were like busting out like cups and bowls and plates and whatever for all these different,
yeah,
that was like, and then you said you last minute changed to textiles. Was
yeah.
there something about you that you're like, I feel done with ceramics, or there was like, what was the hook? Because it is a bit of a, it's a kind of a different craft, to be honest.
Way different. And like the physical making of ceramics versus like the physical making of textiles is just night and day, where like ceramics, like you're got slop up to your neck and everything, and it's very physical, and you're like holding down stuff on the wheel. And then for like knitting or weaving, it's like just hours of repetitive motion, and like it takes, you can't do it fast, or like if you're working with like a loom or a knitting machine, it's just like the pace you're going is the pace you're going. And but I think just seeing fabric like that people had made, that they had put thought into, was just eye-opening to me, and like the texture of it. And I mean, the real reason was because the ceramics department had like 5 people in it. One other person wanted to go in my year in at RISD, and I didn't like him. So I was like, I don't know if I could do this for like 3 years, hang out with this one guy. But so there was that. But I think also I just like I realized that like how cool fabric could be if it was handmade, or like if you put intention into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember like um a very specific moment where like I had been to galleries and been exposed to like real paintings and things like that as a young kid, and been interested, like definitely been moved, but it wasn't until I was like, you know 19 or 20, kind of like found painting on my own, where I saw like some of Alex Gray's work, and it was just like, wait, that's a that's a painting. I thought that was a digital computerized image. I was just so blown away that I'll just never forget that as like the hook. That was like, no, I want to learn how to at least like start figuring out how to do that. That is amazing to me. So I didn't know if you like saw a piece or there was like that hook in it for you.
Yeah, I think there was the hook, but it was sort of like like I just saw a variety of what people were making, and I was like, if I could do that sort of thing, I think it was always went back to imagery for me, like where I'm like, just that, like there was an emotionality to what people were making. But I mean, I'm not very interested in, I mean, this is going to sound, but like I like to work with figures and like representational stuff. And, there wasn't much of that in textiles, just because it's hard to do anything other than, you know, play with like geometric shapes and different colors and stuff. Like it's, you know, like it either takes a bunch of time or like really fancy equipment to do imagery. And so, but like I just was thinking like I want to take this and put a figure in it, and like that feels like important enough for me to like build sort of, I don't know, like maybe not a career but just like a really intense passion out of. At the time I definitely felt that way. And yeah, I don't know, I think, I mean, like that was kind of the hook, I guess. But do you think that, I mean, I'm interested in like, because your is it your mom is an artist, right?
It's my stepmother and my dad's wife.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's been in my life since I was like 4 or 5 years old, so it
Uh-huh.
definitely plays a big role.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that there is sort of like the, like seeing her art kind of also like made it more difficult for it to be your thing too? I mean, I definitely feel like that, some of that, I mean, my mom spent a lot of time like trying to include me in being an artist, but I definitely like starting to see artwork as like a young adult and like being, you know, just seeing like, oh, like not just, I don't know, like historical and like Renaissance paintings aren't the only paintings that there are and stuff like that. Do you
Right.
feel like you had a hard time like breaking off from what you had known as like a kid, or that was a shift of frame?
Um. So I mean, we had some of her work up in her house, like a couple pieces here and there, and she had also gone to RISD too. Um,
Oh.
but then at this point, she worked for like a design firm in San Francisco that did that. One of their accounts was Visa, Office Max, like a lot of like corporate design. So like it was like, to me as a kid, art was kind of boring, and it was like Shelley's thing, but that was like her professional. It just like it was different, and the stuff that I liked was like drawing like Dragon Ball Z ninjas, like just like kid stuff. And then so it kind of got suppressed, I think, until I was sharing that I was out and like exploring my young self, taking psychedelics for the first time, like seeing art and being like, whoa, that art speaks to me right now. Because a Renaissance painting, if you're 10, 11 years old, not that interesting.
Yeah.
If you're like studied art for 50 years, that's probably the type of art you want to look at, really. But it wasn't until I think I found it for myself, and then, I mean, it's interesting, man. I think about it a lot. Like, is that why I like it? Because my dad likes somebody who likes this, so I'm
Uh,
trying to earn his respect still, like. But I don't know. It's interesting when I examine it, like, a lot of people have said, "Oh, where'd you go to school, or where'd you get your start?" And I used to just say, "Oh, there's no. I just do it for a hobby." But if I really break it down, I mean, it has been helpful and has played a role to have at least it available to me,
uh-huh.
and some exposure to it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, I guess my mom's view of like art history is very much, I mean, she's like, well, had just like told me about like painters in art history, or like, I mean, even the painters that were somewhat like were famous when she was like going to art school are now, like she's 62. And so it's just like, it's just a different time, like very different time. uh Whereas like being, I guess, like when I was in school and like kind of like getting my bearings, I very much was like, whoa, like there's so much different stuff. And like, I don't know, just like conceptual art and like just everything that art can be was very exciting. And I guess I'd just been looking at a lot of painters before that, and it expanded my worldview. But then it's pretty funny also, my mom's like, you're kind of like a full of yourself type of artist, or like snobbish.
To you?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Which, I mean, I can kind of see, because I definitely went through some snobbish phase, like when I was learning about like conceptual art, or like learned who Saul LeWitt is, and then was like, I know about this. And she's just like, fuck off.
Around here, you're pretty like volume's pretty down on the ego. You only have one piece up in the house.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I have a hard, I mean, it is hard to just, I don't know, the like hanging stuff up, everything out. I think I just get so excited about the process of like making and figuring out something I want to figure out, and then sometimes I'll look at it and be really into it, or like not, but it's still just like, okay, cool, on to the next thing.
Right.
Even when I'm not making stuff that much, I still like don't really like to go back and look at everything. I like to just move on.
I know that's your manifester side of your human design profile.
Oh yeah, is that right?
Super stoked to get something going and really good at like getting a project going, almost seeing it all the way through. But like when it comes to like that final little like, I mean, the manifestor's not good at that part.
Yeah.
And being a manifester myself, I have this. Thank you everybody who bought these hoodies, but oh my gosh, have I had such a hard time like sealing the deal on it. It's like it came all the way through, and then there was some delays on some orders. Right when I finally think I got everything done, and people have waited over a month, it's just been like such a hassle. Finally send out the last 5 sweatshirts, and like I just a week ago got another one that was like, hey, no pressure, but like been waiting since December to get my and I'm just like the same thing. It's like when I started that project, I was so about that, but like seeing it all the way through, it's hard for some people.
Yeah.
You need that. I don't know, a second eye being like, hey, you did like 95% of this thing. It's just like it's only 95% done. If it was 100, it would be 100.
Yeah. That last 5% gets real important.
It does. I'm speaking from experience, but I'll be like already so inspired to start the next, the next piece, project, next endeavor, whatever.
Totally. I think sometimes I just have to like, I mean, it's always about kind of like figuring out where your energy is and being like, all right, like I'm in the mood to make some shit. So I'm just gonna like whip some stuff out quick, and I may be excited about big projects, but I just have to be like, nope, not right now. I know what you're doing. Like you're gonna like half finish this. It's not gonna work. And so then just being like, kind of like trying to suppress that a little bit and be like, how about you make a big project, but it's out of a lot of little things. That like, so if it's 95% done, it's like minus one thing that you thought you were gonna have in there, instead of like like every like this beautiful thing that just like doesn't have some very crucial part of it that was at the end. But yeah, I mean, that was like when I was doing ceramics, especially in high school, like I did make just a bunch of stuff. Like I'd work on cups and like just want to make them very thin and then just give them to people, because you can only have so many cups, but it was a thing where like I didn't trim a single, like I still don't really know how to trim, and that's a very basic part of being a ceramicist. But I just like, I was like, I'm just gonna get good enough at throwing that like the base is, I mean, like just so that I don't need to trim the bottom of my cups. Like, I just want to get that good at throwing. And the way you do that is by just doing it a lot. So I never did get that good at throwing pottery, but it was, I have a lot of funky, very clunky bottom cups.
Did you, gosh, I'm trying to think of what. I lived with a guy named Darren who was like a ceramics teacher at like, was it Chabot College or something? Did you do any ceramics up through there at all? At any point? No.
No.
Yeah, I just, it was just I think it was maybe not, maybe it wasn't Chabot, but it was something in the Bay Area because we were living in the Diamond District at that time. But he was, I mean, living with a pro ceramist, or he was a teacher or a teacher or something like
Yeah.
that. But just the amount of the volume that he would produce was just impressive because he'd be firing for students, and it was just like just so many cups and plates, and
Yeah.
but at the same time, it really, again, it was one of those things where you look at there's cups everywhere, and I had never really appreciated the cup until I lived with somebody that was making them all the time, and you're like, ooh, this cup is really good for this, and this is like the perfect cup for that, and
Or you like drinking something and be like, oh no. Like, this hits my nose. I don't like it at all. Like, whereas you just like, if you don't think about that stuff, you just like find a way to work around it. It's like not a problem.
no,
But if
yeah.
you do care about it, then it's like, oh yes, like these are definitely the superior cups. That's, my dad also was very into ceramics. When I was a kid, we did it together. So
Oh,
that's like, I mean, it's very much like my whole family was very creative and definitely supported that part, like, or that side of me. But my dad will definitely be like, oh, look at the curve of this bowl. Like, isn't that just gorgeous? Or like, this stuff, I got it so thin and like the bottom is beautiful. And I was just like, I mean, I'm definitely more like, like this is a fun skill to have. Like, I just want to turn them out, or yeah, I think I have a hard time being like getting into like the design part of things. Like, I'm not very much of a designer.
uh-huh, uh-huh. Well, I gotta hand it to you. I mean, when I was at the studio the other day, you definitely like to work hard and like just really push yourself. I mean, like the level of commitment that you're invested in your studio now and what you're going to be taking on in the next couple of years. I mean, that's, I don't know, that's not something that to be taken lightly. Like, there's not that many people I think that are bold enough to, I don't know, get the professional stole machine going and set up and say like, I mean, I'm just trying to think for myself, like on some things that have worked out, like, and I knew they would, but like a lot of times there could be people around you that have a lot of doubt or questioning or anything. Did you have any experience with that, or did you kind of feel like you had free reign of like, I'm gonna just, you had support no matter what?
um, yeah, I mean, I'm very like I think my family has been really supportive, which is cool. I think, I mean, but definitely nobody being like, yeah, it sounds like a good plan, or like, I mean, also just because I haven't been able to really articulate what I'm going to do with the stole machine, it's just that I really love it. And I think, I mean, I'm lucky enough that like to be in a place where nobody was like, you just can't do this, or like to have to convince anybody about like to give me like the money to do it, or to convince somebody that like, I don't know, like I was pretty unrestrained in my ability to do it. But also, I mean, I definitely was like, what am I doing here a lot of the time? Or people would be like, oh yeah, like you shouldn't buy this. I mean, I went to a class where it's just been difficult to like actually have time with the machine. Like, I've programmed a pretty good amount, but like actually like working with the machine, pushing the buttons, like putting the yarn and like through everything, and like I don't know, like doing all that type of stuff. I didn't have any experience in, and I went to this class in North Carolina and to learn more about the stole machine, and they only like taught me about programming it, which was kind of a bummer. And then the guy there was like, "Oh, you shouldn't just haul off and buy a stole machine. Like that's so like that's like you don't even know how to use it kind of thing."
Yeah.
And but for me, I mean like it was obvious also that like he never like he had no frame of reference for like doing art on a stole machine. And also, I mean, and he was just kind of like, you're just gonna put it in the garage of your house and forget about it in a few years. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not what's gonna happen. And I felt a little bit vindicated since, because I'm just like, no, I can do this at least somewhat. Like I definitely had a lot of, I think I definitely have like expected some of the worst from it, and just getting it like into my studio, I've experienced some of, I mean, just like having to pay thousands of more dollars than I thought I was going to have to pay for like simple tasks. And like people just being like, oh, I don't know about the sound, or like it just like not realizing like how big of a thing having a loading dock is, or how much what types of people move things into apartments that are like thousands of pounds. That's all been, but it's interesting like how much of a learning experience it is. But it's just like I've just done it because I was interested, like I wanted this thing. So it was definitely, it all felt like very worth it, and I'm very glad that I did it. But
No, I mean, I've seen it and it's amazing. And I wish we could like give people like a visual really quick.
yeah, I know.
Really is. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting to hear you describe it, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like the people saying potentially it's too loud, or that maybe you should reconsider. You're gonna just only use like all those like kind of arguments are always like it's just like you have no idea why I want this, and it's like your little
Yeah.
hang up has like you're so beyond wrong that like
Yeah.
like I almost don't know how to answer this, because like you're just not getting what I'm trying to do. So like there's times where I feel like I have like there's like this huge mission coming, through me that's like it's involves art and crypto and all these things, and they're not something that can be explained in one sentence, and like taking the like you said, it's like doing art on a stole machine, like that's pretty hard to describe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, it's also pretty funny because like the business model of doing art on a stole machine is just completely different than like doing anything else on a stole machine. Whereas like, I mean, because usually like a lot of the people who are in the industry are like just will work somewhere that has like 30 of them and be running them constantly doing like a few things. And like what you're programming is, like programming takes up like such a small amount of like the time that you're just running the stole machines, that it's like you do one program for like a few weeks, like I mean, I don't know really how much, but it just seems like you like work for a long time on a program and like really develop it, and then it's perfect, and then you run it forever. And but like the way I just have to work with a stole machine and want to is like like drawing, programming, knitting, and then like going back and like doing all of those things again. And like I mean like the programs just like build off of one another, where you get like a good knit stitch and then you'll like put it in a bunch of different drawings, or like get an interesting structure, and then that's just like part of the repertoire. Like somebody might have like a big paintbrush that they use or something like that. It's very similar. And it's, I mean, I think like the only thing that like really convinced this guy was I was like, no, I'm like not looking to sell just like a bunch of something. Like I just want to sell one for like, you know, multiple thousands of dollars. And like that's all I, you know, like, and then he was like, oh, okay. Like that makes sense then. It's like, is that what I needed to say? Is that I think I can make money, you know, like tell you how I'm making money, but like, I don't know. I was like paying for this class and it was, you know, like for a week, and it just, instead of answering all of the questions I had, he was like, just like made me convince him that I should have a stole machine, when it's like, you're not a consequential part of this, dude. Like you could just answer my questions and think it's a bad idea, and like I wouldn't have to have gone through this whole situation. But yeah, what can you do?
Well, that's one of the things that I really admire about you is that um, you have these visions that are, I mean, they could seem far fetched to somebody. You know, they could be like, "You're gonna do what?" You know, like it's gonna, you know, what does it involve? Like, and like you're willing to like take it with grace and patience and answer people's questions and be like, actually, it's not loud at all. The stole machine. It's not gonna like. It's a silly question, but I'm not gonna make fun of you because you asked it. You know, like that type of like approach to this is it's cool. I think it's rad. And like it, like seeing your studio in the Stole Machine, it was just like, you know, when you like know somebody and you know that they make art, but you haven't seen like quite like the factory or like the madness that you know. When I saw it, it was just like, okay, this makes sense because it lines up with like you make major moves. And I was joking about the like dinosaur shirt earlier today, but it's like I don't know. Maybe you were an old soul that's like come here to be like, all right, got to make some more major moves, I guess. Because there's a lot of like, there's a lot of major moves happening socially in our culture, and this is one of the topics that we talk about often, which I love. And until recently, there's all these different like battlefronts, I guess you could say, that I've been witnessing people fight and stand up for, and I haven't felt like until now that I've like clicked and realized like, oh wait, okay, I have found my battle, and it's not necessarily about uh, cryptocurrency so much, but it's about like holding space for people and saying like, hey, we're on Google Chrome. That's a centralized web browser. If you use a decentralized web browser like Brave, they will pay you in crypto to use it, and there's no ads. If you want to watch ads, they'll pay you to watch ads because just like that movie The Social Dilemma, all of these centralized social media applications, centralized banking systems, centralized voting systems, if something's centralized, that means that there's a person at the top that says, we decide if this is legit or not. And that's worked for a while, but now with the internet and the ability to see these mathematical blockchains and have them verified quickly, we can ensure that everybody is being honest. And if people are being honest, like it changes the game quite a bit because people behave differently and they act with more integrity. And in fact, the people that act with hyper integrity tend to get rewarded even more in a in a system that's transparent. And I'm not talking about having a video camera on you all the time, but I am talking about like, okay, this person is running for this particular position, whatever. Here's where all of the backing comes from. Like that might, you know, be like make you reconsider where you want to spend money on what companies or whatever, but having it visible to everybody, I think would really change our system. And there's a lot of people that are like, what's the next Facebook? What's the next Google? What's the next whatever? And it's like, it's here, but like all we have to do is move over. Like it's not, I mean, it's a matter of time, and it takes me telling you to tell the next person, and then eventually it'll happen. But in my opinion, if we continue to play by these rules that our society has up for us, like we're not going to change it. And when I see people standing up for Black Lives Matter, the Bernie Sanders movement, all these different movements that are like, these are my friends for sure, but it didn't really like ignite me like it does where I'm like, I want to teach people to get decentralized, to get their privacy back. And it's not about money. In fact, it's like the opposite. It's just a different system. It's like literally having to reteach somebody. So you have to kind of hold their hand through some of these topics where it's like, this is a big deal. It affects all of us, like, and it's like one of those things where somebody is like, you're Jesse, you're racist at one point. And at first my reaction is like, no, I'm not, and then it had to like kind of sit with me and break it down and realize that I had been taught to engage in this certain way. And there's certain things like even with our internet and device use, like we've been told that this is the way to do it and it serves a very few people.
Mhm.
And so anyway, that was kind of like a long-winded like turn of topics here, but like
Yeah.
what kind of like what kind of thing inspired you to feel like somebody that wanted to be involved in social change?
I mean, I guess it's hard not to. I don't know. I think that when I came out as trans, I um it never felt like something I could just do quietly. I just felt like the need to control the narrative kind of thing. And I think I've told you about like how I came out, but like I was 15 in high school in Berkeley High, and like, and it kind of like met with all of my teachers and told them like, this is what's going to happen. Like, I'm Felix now, and like, please use he, him pronouns for me. And then and then like, I stood up in front of the class and like told everybody all at once that I was like transitioning, and like what my new name was and what my pronouns were, and kind of like, and I mean, Berkeley High was definitely it. It's a very diverse school. Like, my classmates were pretty, like, of different income levels and a bunch like culturally different, everything. So it was kind of like a really good first example of like, here's people you'll meet as a trans person. But I was like, and like, and everybody had to know I was trans because I was asking them to use different pronouns for me and stuff. It's not like I could hide it from some people. Uh, and I mean, I was just super lucky to be in like a really cool culture of, like having queer teachers, having like all of my teachers were allies for sure, and like tried to understand how I was identifying, and like some of the conversations I had with them when I was coming out to them were like really, I mean, just like wonderfully informative. And I mean, I've always been a teacher's pet, and I just liked being able to talk to them about stuff. Um, and I mean, and they were all very interested in fighting for social change. So it definitely, I mean, it was just like having those conversations and being sort of like the ambassador for like, you know, what it is to be trans, like to a bunch of people. I mean, especially high schoolers who are like, yeah, all right. Like, I don't know how to like envelop this in my worldview. I don't know whether I should be like freaked out about it or not. And I mean, I just wanted to be like, here's what's going on. Like, like, I'm a pretty normal person still. Like, uh, but I think so that was, I mean, it's kind of pushed into it. And then just, I don't know, I've been kind of like, I mean, I went and spoke to City Hall when like they were talking in Berkeley about the bathrooms, like making it right that trans kids could go to the bathroom in whichever bathroom they identified with. And like that was just like a year or a little bit less before it became a national law. So it was kind of like, you know, I mean, it's so, I mean, interesting to think of now just because there's so much trans stuff in the public eye. But like, I mean, when I came out, I knew of Chaz Bono and Boys Don't Cry. Like, that was like the two trans guy things I'd ever seen. And now it's definitely, it's not like that at all. I mean, there's a lot more representation and still not a lot, but I think also, yeah, I mean, so, but then I've also like, and I had people that I had talked to who had gone through transitioning when I was younger, and like I got to be in, like, to find a bit of a community when I was in high school. And then I've been lucky to like have people come out and like talk to them. I mean, like, to me now, and like to be able to talk to and meet a bunch of different people, just because people will be like, oh, my second cousin just came out, like, can you, they call you on the phone, or like, just like very random connections, like, while you're here, like, would you mind talking to this trans person that like I know? And or I mean, or like going to Montreal and staying with like, or like talk, hanging out with like my mom's like friend's trans sister and stuff. It's just like, oh, like this is all pretty awesome. Like that there's a bit of a I mean, it's just like so much of a community. And then because I've just been talking about it since I was 15, and like, and then still trying to understand more about myself and like how my own gender is changing, it's like, it's something that'll never stop being fascinated to me. And like, and I feel like I get so much out of talking to people who aren't, like, now that there is a culture of like how to talk about trans people, or like there's like some sort of like a, I mean, like people are building up a way like to understand, like when somebody asks to like uses they them pronouns, like how should you react, like all of those things are like being built a little bit more into like the general consciousness. But like I really do think that conversations with people who like don't know are some of the most interesting, because they make me think about gender in a whole different way. And I think, approaching it like I have everything figured out because I'm trans is not like, I don't know, just not. I mean, I think I've gone through periods of feeling like that, like pretty full of myself, and then just been like, oh, I had nothing figured out. Like things have totally shifted around for me because my gender isn't the same, like my context isn't the same, like, you know, and it wouldn't have been the same if I was raised in a different way. And just being like, okay, like like this thing that I feel like I'm like the the like that I know so much about is just like constantly shifting and interesting. So.
No, I mean it's certainly been it's certainly been interesting to watch my own relationship with it and like level of ignorance to the whole matter. I mean, it's definitely never been something that I've like had an issue with people being trans. I mean, I know that's like some people are against it strongly, and I've never felt that. But then I don't think I was like just quick to have the vocabulary to having switching pronouns for people or using they them pronouns until someone of my, I had to sit down with somebody and say like, hey, I know this is a thing. I don't actually understand this. And they helped me get like a little bit more of an understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
then just recently listening and like hearing like a producer DJ using they them pronoun for like a whole different reason. Like it was like to for their new child to see if yeah, to put no boundaries around the child, saying that like you don't have to be this way or that way. Like let's just see how this thing rolls. And I mean, all I think all of those things are like I mean, they're super important, and they've never not been. They've been the same level of importance, but like, for me, I'm a kind of a slow learner, and it's like I can only get it at that speed, and I just wonder how many people are out there with like they're like semi-supportive. Do you know what I mean? Like you can be like semi-supportive of something, but still kind of walk by and be like, well, not my problem. It's like, oh, I believe that there's like, racism in our country, and I don't believe it's good. But then you're walking by, somebody that's harassing somebody because they're X, Y, and Z. That's kind of like passive racism a little bit, a little bit. Like, how do you take that next? I guess to me, I'm like, I don't know if we had not connected that I would be on the level of like, no, I want to stand up as much as I can as an ally.
Mm-hmm.
But is that the only way that like people need to like they need a connection in their own life? Because like there was a time where people would regularly joke about being mentally handicapped. It's like the person's retarded, and that was like an acceptable word until our culture kind of was like we vacuum that out, and because you're like actually like I know somebody like that, and it's not funny. It's not funny to make like that's not a joke. It doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it is like people are starting. I mean, like, I definitely have seen people who, I mean, especially if it's like somebody wants to use they them pronoun, or like you have one person in your life who's using they them pronouns and you're kind of confused about it, but then and you sort of start to try to do it and like aren't really doing it very consistently, or doing it when they're not around, type of thing. But then like I think it's like it's building up where like like not only is your nephew using them, but or like some like a younger relative that doesn't have a gender using them, but then like also your coworker is, or like I think it's beginning to be, I mean, especially then also in like pop culture, a lot more people are using they them pronouns, and it really gives people a frame of reference for like, I mean, just hearing people say like how like I think it's kind of like how you don't know how to speak Spanish, or like you can hear it and not want to speak it for a long time, and then you can just like one day be like, no, I should just do this, because like I'm in Mexico now, like I have to, so like I think it's like it's just going to be a little bit uncomfortable, or like you only like want to dip your toes in the water until you just feel all right, like it. And using they them pronouns does feel uncomfortable at first, or I still have some sentences where I'm like, I'll say it and then I'll be like, did that make any sense? Like, or or like talking about my ex partner who was used they them pronouns and their parents, and then like talking about their parents as them and then them as them is like, it's a lot. But I mean, it's all just like, it's so, I mean, I wish it felt more low stakes, and it does. I mean, it shouldn't feel like it's not important, because it so impacts like the people. I mean, like if you've asked people to use your pronouns and they don't seem like they care, that is just such a hard place to be in, and or just seeing people consistently like not put in the effort to do something that like just like pretty deeply hurts you every time like, I mean, when people used to call me by she her pronouns, like, like it took a while, so like after a few months, a year even, where they were calling me my old name and she her pronouns when I was in school, like it just is jarring. It's like somebody coming up behind you and like grabbing your shoulders or something like that. It's like that type of feeling. And it's like just wanting to be seen and like for people to like participate in kind of like recontextualizing you in their own heads, which is it is an ask, but it's also like it makes so much of a difference, which is like I think it's pretty hard to portray when you don't know somebody who's transitioning, and like see the actual toll that it's taking. But I think as it's being portrayed more in like TV shows and movies, I hope people are kind of like starting to get it a little bit more. But, what can you do? I mean,
Well, yeah, I don't know. That's what I was saying. Like what can you do? But I guess I think of people that are on that level and they're like very welcoming and they're uplifting to their community around them. Just that's their inner nature. I mean, those people are so attractive. There's something really attractive about doing that, and especially if you're somebody that like myself, that was kind of like, I want to support this, but I don't know how. And you see
yeah.
somebody that's just well versed in it, embracing it, doing it great. It's really really cool and can be empowering.
Yeah, totally. And those people who aren't, I mean, like, either are directly affected by, whatever frontier we're talking about. Like, if, like they could be Black or an immigrant or trans or, just gay or anything. And are like talking about it and like really opening up about their experiences, or just like other, like allies who are kind of, I think that's like the real opportunity that like people who identify as allies have, is like to be opening and understanding and not to have the physical reaction that comes with talking. I mean, because like in a conversation trying to get like talk to somebody about gender, and like that trans people exist. I mean, it's like people need to, I mean, like people need to go there, like, and need to, I mean, I'm not saying like they need to as in like they have to, but like in order to learn and wrap one's head around sort of like the possibilities of gender, or in like, and I think, you know my gender is like, it's hard to describe, and if like the stakes are, them thinking I'm a fraud or something, that's a hard conversation to have, to be like a patient and they're just like, I don't think that you are what you say you are, kind of thing. And like that's like, rather not talk to you then, and like, so do you just give up on that person? But like the like if you can be on the, like invest the time in really understanding gender and sexuality and the interplay, and like, and having thought about your own gender and how it affects your world, and like how that might be different if you were trans, like, I mean, there's a lot to think of there. And like the people who have thought about that pretty deeply and like try to see like how their gender is affecting their experience, and then can talk to, people who don't know a trans person, or like don't know one very well, or just confused about like the language and stuff, and be welcoming in that, and also, I mean, like, yes, standing up for trans people somewhat, but also like letting people have the space to say offensive stuff, you know? And because they're trying to understand and not being like, oh, we don't say that because we don't say it, you know? But instead being like, well, if you take, you know, like if you take what you're saying right now to the next level, then you can see that it leads to something you probably don't believe in, you know? Or like if you're saying that every man must have a penis, like that's, I mean, you probably don't really believe that. Like if you lost your penis, you wouldn't think you're not a man, or, you know, like, and there's like other, I mean, like examples of like people being intersex or just, you know, plenty, I mean, like, and also, I don't know, I mean, just all of that where it's like you can have sort of the talking points and but still be with that person in sort of a listening to them too, you know, and being able to listen because you're not having the physical reaction that somebody who's experienced it would have, you know. I think that's like a good ability of, you know, like to be able to back people up like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so the astrology claim is like it's the age of Aquarius, right? So like we are supposedly written in the stars here to usher in, you know, these new changes. And going from somebody who I would say was open to supporting this concept, but my ignorance around gender identity was like, okay, I've never felt like an issue, so I don't understand it. I'm willing to support them, but I don't understand it. And then like getting like it explained over and over, deeper and deeper, then you at this point now I'm just like, actually, like the fact that there's this binary gender thing in our culture is very manipulative, and it like projects all these different roles you're supposed to be because you're in this type of body, and if you're you know have this level of femininity, you're, you know, that's not okay. And you know that actually it's very interesting when you really break it down. I mean, it's fascinating. We've talked about Jordan Peterson in the opposite way where he's saying, oh no, it needs to be binary because of this split. But
Yeah.
if you take two sides to that argument, it's like, well, we've tried it that way, why don't we try it this way for a while? And I think all these fronts where I mean plenty of people will be like, there goes Jesse about Bitcoin again. But you know, I think if you are passionate about something, there is a reason for it, even if like our human egos don't really see the huge picture and the roles that we're like. I mean, we are changing the world slowly and hopefully for the better. I mean, that's what we'd all hope. But there are certain things that a lot of people I feel connected to and consider my friends, it seems like they're all fighting to change these different things of society, and a lot of them are very very invested in like kind of like getting deeper into those like realms. And for many years, like the last couple years, I've thought like, okay, I don't really get the Black Lives Matter because I'm not a person of color. But I know it's important, you know. And then, but now it's like all of this is important. Like that plays a big role. The binary gender system that's been projected over however many hundreds of years in our country, at least, like that has an effect on us. It has a huge effect. And having our data just kind of stolen and sold around is like super not cool. Like most people don't understand that when they're going on their computer, even on Instagram, you're literally programming for a data collection machine. Like you're clicking a 0 or a 1 every single time, and that data it's so valuable that people will pay billions of dollars for it, because like with that much information you can sell people things. And so it's like you could say, oh, he's talking about Bitcoin, but it's like, actually, no, I just want you to, if you're going to at least go 0101 on your computer or iPhone, I want you to at least get paid for it. Because I think your attention is the only thing we're never, that you're not going to get back. You can't get your time back, you know? So, trying to wrap this all like up, I'm like, is there, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm like kind of at a loss for words because there's only like so many things I can say about it as I'm like continuing to learn about all these topics daily,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I think there is an interesting intersection. I mean, I definitely have been a lot more invested in um sort of like Black Lives Matter protests, and I mean just like I think learning about race for longer. I mean, I mean just like then sort of data on like I mean that's not something that calls out to me to like learn more about, just because I mean I think in similar ways, like looking at gender in the way that I mean I think having been or like not being like binary, or just kind of realizing how flexible all these systems are, or like especially gender, where it's like at least for me I'm just like I can play with this stuff, and it's fun, like to be I mean even though I've felt hardship around transitioning, I also am somewhat at a point where I'm like I feel more feminine. I can play with looking more feminine, either looking like a man who's trying to be more feminine or a woman-ish, kind of, like just like playing around with how I'm perceived, and like that is very exciting, but then like kind of expanding that like understanding of how like me being perceived in a different way leads to behavior being so different around me, like people judging me in certain ways, or like getting glares at the grocery store versus not getting glares at the grocery store, just random stuff like that. But then also like it's pretty, I mean, not one to one to expand it out to understanding race a little bit better, but like understanding that perception of it, and then tied into a deep history in the US of like in specifically in the US as well, of like slavery and Jim Crow, and like trying to get out of that, and still like with like the racial wealth gap still not, it's not closing, it's not even on a trajectory towards closing,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean where that's like kind of like being having a marker to understand some similarities to like being discriminated against gender wise, and then seeing a lot of like differences as well, and like then kind of like knowing what I don't know, and like being able to dig deeper into that. But I think it's been interesting to talk to you about like I mean crypto, and then also I mean this data stuff. See, I mean it's interesting because I think when I think about like a world that I want to live in, or like what I'd like it's always been centered around this like multi-racial, multi-gender sort of soup or like connection of beings, but like not, I mean like it's interesting that like sort of the way you're visualizing a world starts with like a certain type of economy. I mean, that's what it seems like to me. And like just like changing the way people relate to each other, like with money, or like how money is given and received and where it exists, kind of would change the world that much. Or like that in a new system, there is the opportunity for all of these things to shift radically, kind of, because I mean, like, you know, for it not to be centralized, then if the, like, I mean, just anytime there is sort of a radical shift, and if like we're going from like regular dollars to cryptocurrency, then there's like the opportunity for a big cultural shift in that as well, it seems like, which is interesting. And just seeing like where the opportunities are is really interesting in that.
Well, I loved what you said earlier. I mean, like knowing that you don't know that much about something.
Yeah.
Like, especially in this conversation, I think that is like our power. Like we're like, I'm really ignorant about this, and I want to learn more. Like that helps you. It gives you points, you know, and it also helps like tell the other person that you're like, I'm all ears, you know,
Yeah.
and like I think for the last, you know, ever since I ran into a Bitcoin, I've been so focused as if that is the one way to change the world. That like voting for president and race and all these things, yeah, they matter, but not as much as this. And it's like now I don't think that's really the case. I'm like, you know, our conversations and like we had our friend Matt on, and he's talking about how like how much gender plays a role if it's binary, like how limiting it is, and now
Uh-huh.
coming to this conclusion that like this all matters, and that matters just as much as the economic matters, as race matters. Like it's literally all the same, and it's the same level of importance. And the like the faster that we can break all of these little battles down is when we have the new world. So it's like at first I thought nobody's seeing what I'm seeing, and it's like, well, nobody needs to see. This section is like this is you do your part, and then you know there's people doing that part, there's people doing this part, there's people doing that part, and then all together, that's how we like create the new system. And I mean, it's just still dawning on me now, where I'm like learning as much as I can about like what kind of battles or what kind of like social change you want to see in the world and that you stand up for actually really it does impact me, and it educates me, and it makes me remember, hey, what I'm working on is also important to share and talk about. And it doesn't mean that like, you know, you have to be the next, you know, joining my protest or like going to this event or anything, but just having that like open ear and being like, huh, okay, yeah, remind me again. Because it's like every time we have these conversations, I'm like, I think I have it, and then it's like, oh, I'm real clunky right here, and like, you know, I'm
Yeah.
like, there's just like so much more for me to learn. It's good to be like, okay, humbled again, still learning, and the more I learn, like the more I do make a little bit of progress, and it affects other ways, you know, other aspects of my life too.
Totally. Yeah. I That's interesting. I mean, because I definitely think, I mean, the idea of like intersectionality between like gender and race is a huge one. You know, like the experience you have as a Black person and as a woman is different, and then the experience you have as a Black woman is also different. But I think it's then kind of taking it out into like this sort of like another frontier of intersectionality, which I mean, it's not like as much about social change, but it's also, I mean, it's a possibility for social change, is what it sounds like. And it's, yeah, I mean, it's definitely very interesting to learn about. And also like in the context of art. And like, I mean, that's what I love about sort of making art, is that it's like a different way to communicate. And like your idea about having an art show, which people pay for in Bitcoin, or, you know, I mean, that's just, it's, when I really like, I started thinking about it, I was like, oh shit, you know, like this is, I mean, like then tying it into like the economics of art is really interesting. And like, I mean, because I think also like the way like people like relate to gender and race around art are really interesting too, you know, or like just that you can explore so much, or that like an art show is a place where people can do any, you know, like you can, you're already expecting to be sort of pushed outside of your boundaries, or like, you know, or that like the images and like artifacts that we have of people living outside the norm, the cultural norm, are from artists so much of the time, you know? I mean, like writers and stuff, but also, you know, like Robert Mapplethorpe. I don't know. Like I'm thinking about just like, or people doing art or being around art, you know, and just like kind of getting into these situations where they're all talking about stuff, and like queer people and people who are, you know, like just like coming together because they, I don't know, are thinking and dreaming and want to communicate, that is all very exciting. But, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it back to the art because I did want to check back in,
Oh yeah.
check back in on the art. Like, is because I've seen a lot of your pieces being pretty sexy. Is that like is there was there a point where that was something that you were ashamed of that you needed to break through?
Yeah, well, I guess I've always been pretty ashamed of my own sex drive, like, and kind of being afraid that, I mean, especially being trans, like, just that feeling like deeply unsexy, or even like people aren't able to contextualize me in as somebody to have sex with, you know, like, I mean, at least in high school, I very much felt that way. Like, oh, you know, like I'm just, you know, like I didn't know many queer people in high school. So like, it was like, are you, and I was pretty attracted to men, but like, I didn't want to say that. And like, nobody from high school, like, knew that I was attracted to men, I guess, like looking back on it. But, um, you know, like just feeling like extremely like I want male friends, but then can't show that I'm attracted to that, or like feel like I can't show that I'm attracted to them, and female friends, but then don't, like, we have a very deep non-sexual connection, and then like not knowing, like just feeling like all of my sexual feelings like have to be very close to me, you know, or I can't show them at all. And then I think there is just a point where, I mean, it, to me it just feels like the most adventure I have is like trying to find sex. And maybe it's because I didn't feel like I had permission to show my sexuality in like my peer group, but I've always like gone after sort of different sexual experiences, or like they've always been an adventure, you know, like, I mean, going to sex parties and stuff like that, but also, I mean, I've always kind of just gone after sexual situations. And so that's kind of like what I like drawing, just because I think also like I just like being a little bit horny when I'm drawing. Like, and so drawing sex makes a lot of sense. Or and also like I don't know, like, and I like the idea of making a lot of other people kind of horny too. Like that it's, I mean, that like that should be something you like. Art makes you feel so many things, you know? And like it's silly to think that it doesn't make you feel horny. I mean, it's been making people feel horny since the beginning of time, you know? And like
Yeah.
that's the first thing people paint when, you know, like when you're a kid, when you're in ancient times doing a cave painting, like, you know, buffalo and penises is all you really think about, I feel like. So
It just I like when some of the pieces you've been bringing home recently of the knit ones. They just have this nice. It's a nice attitude. It's got this nice little fuck you attitude too. It just it's classy, but it's just got this like edge to it that I just love. Like I don't know. It's very 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 cool. I love your work. I think it's awesome.
Appreciate that. I
Yeah.
mean, it's been fun to just feel like in a making mode. It's been
Yeah. Yeah, and just the medium is like great. I just think it's so cool. Like again, it's one of those things where I'm like, if you said, "Oh, I make tactiles," like you could pull up the meme like, "Here's what my friends think I make," you know. Here's what my mom thinks I make, you know. This is, you know.
I think there's a lot of memes like that on some, you know, meme page that I don't follow anymore. But
Because
yeah,
now as I'm starting to like see it and you're bringing pieces home regularly. I'm just like, wow, this is so. It's like no one's doing this that I can see, and I just think that there's a lot of room for you there to like develop yourself and just be stoked and be yourself. Like you're you're creating art about yourself, which I think is rare and cool.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, it always is a little bit scary and kind of narcissistic to create stuff about yourself, but just that it's going to be pitiful, you know? And then, like, you must be pitiful too. But I don't know. I just, at some point, it just doesn't matter because it's like fun to make stuff. And like, I've always just made stuff about myself because, I mean, I don't know. I like I like thinking about stuff and like I'm pretty central to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's like a. It's not narcissistic to be stoked on yourself. I mean, there's a way to be narcissistic about it, but like everybody's life is about themselves, you know? Like
Yeah.
if you start making your life about somebody else or something else, like you're going to eventually, you know, run into some trouble there, I think.
Yeah. And I mean it's pretty important to acknowledge that you're seeing the universe through your own eyes, you know? Like
Right.
that like everything I mean, I guess that's kind of also the like the like in journalism, like with Hunter S. Thompson, like that's sort of the tension between, you know, like journalism where you're like supposed to be very objective, but then like every journalist is a human being and like reacting to things from like the vantage point that they are. And I mean like the same with artists where like I think for me it's interesting to have that reaction to stuff but then be like it's because of like and then do like the thinking about like why I react to stuff that way as opposed to like how somebody else might react and like in doing that kind of like trying to dismantle like what pieces are of me you try to get the objective world too or like you know like show the lens more than what the photograph is sort of thing like
Mm.
yeah but I don't know. I mean that's like I think why I'm drawn to it and also I mean like I just do a lot of contemplating my own reactions to stuff which can get you know can be too much for my own self to handle but
I didn't want to say fuck you attitude. I meant more like sometimes I could like I have to double take because it could be like, oh, my grandmother knit this nice stitching thing, and you're like, oh my goodness, there's some serious action going on right here. That's great.
I could bring one of these.
Yeah, yeah. Let's. Do you have something?
I guess this is probably the one you're talking about, right?
Oh yeah, that one's sweet.
Yeah.
That's the one that we're hoping to. It becomes a sweater someday.
Yeah, maybe. You can say just the most blowjobby part of it. But you know, like it's pretty funny because now that it is like my art and everything I produce is like this, I'm like, do I send it to my grandparents? Like, is that too much? But definitely to my mom, you know, she needs to see it. But she's it's like just an oversharing type of situation.
Yeah, totally. So is there any like shout outs or final subjects we want to like dabble on before we call this one episode 21?
Episode 21, final of the season.
I know. Now we just like maybe we just keep it going. It'll just be one indefinite season.
Yeah, that's a good.
Or like, is that show you've been talking about? Is that confirmed? Is there dates for that or anything?
Oh, no, not quite.
Okay.
Or I'd have to look it up, but it's in Germany.
Oh.
Yeah, so some online stuff to be announced.
World renowned at this point. Internationally recognized.
Yeah, so that's exciting, but I don't have really too much art stuff happening right now, but it will.
Pandemic, I mean, it's
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to send me your website because we'll definitely put your social media links in our description and whatnot.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Felix. I mean,
Jesse, it's great to be here and fun to have this like memorialized as one of our like I feel like it was a synthesis of many other conversations.
Yeah, it was nice, and I mean I really want like my friends that do take the time to be on the show to know that they can come back because like it's nice to have conversations on record that you can express or share projects or things that you're releasing or something like that, you know.
Yeah, definitely. That would be awesome.
Much love. Thank you for watching, everybody. We love you.